Note again that the Indian government was under colonial space. Yeah, but there was this concern about the welfare of the Indians, and sporadically there would be commissions of inquiry set up to examine or investigate what was happening with the Indians in the West Indies. So there, even during the period of colonialism, there was this concern coming from India about the people who had left under the system of Indian indenture. Definitely a concern at all times. So you had that relationship.
And I'm really glad that you're able to be setting this context at this point in time so we have a better appreciation of what is taking place today. But in terms of that toing and froing, looking at the provider of the labor, how did connections remain? How did people maintain connections? And this is between India and Trinidad over the Kalapani.
Mm-hmm. There were many ways that, let's say, the Indians themselves, definitely on an official level, you had correspondences and so on, but I'm talking about the Indians from Trinidad, let's say, to their families in India, and also just maintaining various kinds of relationships with India. At first, during the period of indenture, you can understand that it wasn't frequent. Yeah, they did not have that luxury. So there would be instances where an Indian might be able to get someone to write him a letter to send back to his family. So some correspondences. Then there were many Indians who sent remittances, sums of money, back, sometimes frequently, sometimes sporadically, to their families. There were instances also of inheritances. When someone had died, they would have made what we might call a will today. You know, take my money back to this person in this village and so on. A very key factor in maintaining relationships would be what we call the returnees. Those Indians who, after their period of indenture, would go back to India, and for various reasons, they might realize, I can't do this there. You know, there are no prospects for me there. I've lived in Trinidad for 10 years. This landscape is familiar to me. They may have gone back and their families, their villages would have been wiped out for various reasons. So then they would come back. Now, on this journey back, they know that they are coming back to Trinidad. And this is when they might refresh. They would bring various implements, you know, literature, seeds. So, but because now they know what they are coming to, they are going to live. So these returnees, you know, they were very valuable in maintaining these ties. And some of these returnees realized that, well, I can make a business of this. So they started going back and forth, buying material, whether foods, dry food stuff, books, literature, musical instruments. So that helped to build community and maintain those ties. Then you also had, from as early as the 1950s, Indian artists coming to Trinidad. Indian artists, singers, dancers, musicians, dramatic performance groups. And then, of course, 1935, you had the advent of films in India. And that had a huge impact because via these films, these Indian films, for the very first times, you would have had 1935 people who had actually come from India, but also their descendants. For the very first times, they were actually, India was being brought to them visually. And that had a very big impact to strengthen that connection because now they are seeing. They were able to look at these movies and also refresh in their memories, in their minds, okay, how should a wedding be performed? What happens when someone dies? Yeah, so they're actually seeing it for the first time. So films helped a lot, not just by bringing India alive, but to refresh one's cultural memory, so to speak. Yeah, and then post-indenture, let's say from 1920s, 30s, you started having scholars, Indian missionaries, whether Hindus or Muslims, and also Indian officials. They would come, visit the colonies, visit their various groups, and this also served to have this kind of continuation, whether in the academics or in religion and so forth. So they also provided that kind of connection. And some of these visiting scholars and missionaries, they were responsible for the formation of some socio-religious and some religious organizations like the Divine Life Society and so forth. So that you know, they're coming by refreshing, you know, memories by bringing news about India, how things are done in India, especially making connections with religion. That was a big element, making connections with religion. It would maintain that tie.
And that is a lot to digest. And one of the things that really stands out to me from what you just said is that there was this level of movement back and forth. Because sometimes it feels, just being on the outside and hearing snippets, either you moved from India to Trinidad and you remained. Some people may have gone back, but in terms of going, and even like that entrepreneurial mindset to realize, okay, well, I can make a business of this. There's a need that I can fill. So what was that like in terms of saying, okay, well, are there ports that they want to go to in terms of specific, or what does that look like? Logistics of that?
These entrepreneurial efforts, they were more the exception than the norm. It wasn't like a lot of people would have been doing, because remember, you had to start, you had to have the funds to start it, and not many under the system of indenture or immediately out of it could afford to do that. But those who did it, they would basically, there were no special ships for them, so they would basically embark on the same ships that is during indenture that would be taking indentured laborers back and forth, and they would go to the port of Calcutta or maybe in South India. Yeah, so there were no special ships. They would have to wait for those ships, and of course afterwards, those who continued, well, then of course they would basically they continued with the same ports of Bengal and South India, and ply their trade from there.
Now I can imagine that the relationship between India and Trinidad and Tobago would have transformed somewhat, and this is after the end of that system of indenture. What are some of those ways? And it's 1917, right?
Yes, 17 it was brought to an end, but officially from 1920 you had no more movements. Yeah, definitely the relationship changed, because now it's no longer India and an immigrant community. Those who are staying in Trinidad, they are now, you know, going towards being citizens of Trinidad. So it's definitely a change. There continued to be a concern with the welfare of the Indians. There were a couple of commissions of inquiry post-indenture being set up for the same issue, to look into the conditions of the Indians. From the Indian government, and I remember India got independence in 1945. You also had, I would call it strange, in the sense that there was this concern with the welfare. However, it was, a lot of it was written. I don't think in independent India, early independent India, because so much was going on that there was a lot of, let's say, personal effort to, let's say, come and check on the Indians in the colonies and so forth. But they, via correspondences, they continued to investigate. I remember Nehru, first Prime Minister of India, he said in one of his addresses about his diaspora, India's diaspora, saying, you know, well, Indians are free to come to India if they choose. They're free to come back. But if they choose to stay where they are, then that is their home, and they must recognize that that is their homeland. Continue having cultural ties with India, continue having some sort of maybe cultural responsibility, but it's almost as if you have to choose where your home is. It can't be both places. And you know, that's the truth. They made a choice, and now, you know, you had to, he recognized that they had to navigate now, that dynamic had to change. And then 1962 is a very important step where the Indian High Commission was established in Trinidad. So post-indenture, I think this was the biggest step, the establishment in terms of maintaining relationship, the establishment of the Indian High Commission, and of course the emphasis for a while was on cultural ties, sustaining and strengthening cultural ties, maintaining goodwill with its diaspora. There were a number of scholarships that they continued to give to students, university students. There were programs in Trinidad that they offered in terms of the teaching of Hindi, music, dance, and so forth. So their focus for a long while was just really on propagating culture. And then it was in the 1990s that the emphasis started to change, where it was, in addition to culture, you have now a focus on trading activities, on investment activities. 1990s is when it really took off, so to speak.
All right, so you start talking about culture and then trading, and I want to use that opportunity to bring it to the present day, to ask about some of those promising areas for future collaboration, because the reason that we're here is because the Prime Minister of India is coming to Trinidad and Tobago, and I think we actually have some footage of our Prime Minister, Kamla Prasad-Bissessa, and Minister Barry Padarat, leader of government business. They are at the airport waiting the arrival of Shri Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of the Republic of India. So we're here today. What are some of those potential, those promising areas for future collaboration?
There are quite a lot. Many of them have already been started. India's expertise in many different fields is very evident, and I think that it definitely is a bilateral situation, but Trinidad and Tobago definitely has a lot to benefit from this relationship. You have, well, I will deal with culture because that's the most. It's very evident that it's been a long-standing relationship. But what we've grown accustomed to in terms of culture is almost like one-sided, where we import from Trinidad, from India, sorry. So whether it's films, whether it's music, whether it's song, so forth, whether it's more recently clothing, it's being imported from India. But I think what we should focus on, yes, maintain, because it will be maintained, but we should now try to look at how it can, flow the other way. Our Indo-Trini artists, and not just Indo-Trini, but our Trini artists, the art forms could now be taken to India. We have soca, we have chutney, and it has started because I've seen a few what we call now Bollywood films, and the chutney is there. I heard Kaisi Bani in one of these films, popular film. So it's making an impact in a small way so far. But I do think this is an area that needs to be explored, how our culture could be taken to India, Indo-Trini culture and larger Trinidad and Tobago culture.
And
yeah?
it seems as though sometimes we have these ambassadors who are flying the flag. So we think of someone like DJ Bravo, who is well appreciated and loved in India.
Yes.
And even going a little further back, for the last observance of the Diwali Nagara at NCIC, the daughter of Kanchan and Babla, she was present, she was in attendance. So when you think of going back through the years and the way that Kanchan and Babla would have been influenced by music coming out of Trinidad and Tobago, but they put their own spin on it, which we loved as well.
Yes, they were groundbreaking, and I mean, I grew up on that album that they made on Sundar Propose songs, I think it's 82, yeah, that it was released. So definitely they were groundbreaking, and I do think that we have room for more of that kind of collaboration, and the other way around too, with our Trinbagonian singers, again, as I say, Indo-Trinis and more. To engage in that kind of collaboration with Indian artists and performers, definitely that room. In addition to culture, of course, there is a wide gamut. For example, we've seen, I believe it's last year, former Prime Minister Rowley, he had gone to India, and after that, in November of 24, he met Prime Minister Modi, and they both engaged on talks surrounding a number of issues. Some MOUs were signed, and also some agreements were made, still in progress. And these had to do, and these are areas that definitely are areas that can be pursued in terms of agriculture. I mean, we have a very flailing, sad agricultural industry now in Trinidad. So much more can be done, and India's expertise in agriculture, in biotechnology, so to speak, as it pertains to agriculture, it's outstanding. And as I said, the process has started, and definitely it should go a long way, where India can, skills and tools and so forth. And of course, they've started funding also, but I think skills and tools definitely, it could be a two-way process. Either our personnel acquire those in India, and they have started bringing in personnel into Trinidad to help the situation with agriculture. Then, of course, in areas such as IT and communication, technology, and related technical services, they have also started with platforms such as India Stack and DigiLocker and UPI and so on. Again, India is a giant in these areas, and we are open to it. We definitely are open to it, but I think we need having their expertise coming and guiding us towards that definitely will help.
I think that's such a powerful point, because it's one thing to say, okay, well, we may fund something. It's one thing that we may come and do something, as opposed to say, okay, well, we are building capacity. People talk about teaching a man to fish so that you are able to do it yourself. And this is at a time when we find many nations, many jurisdictions kind of closing doors and looking inward. And then we have an event like this taking place today. But with India's growing role in BRICS, I mean, the I in BRICS is for India. Is that something that you see in the short term we can start to leverage in terms of this relationship that we are developing?
Definitely, because, I mean, India's role in BRICS, India has its fingers or maybe its whole hand in other groups such as the G20, G7, etc. So India has emerged as a very strong advocate for the global South. Some have even put India at the helm of this new phase in global progress, let's say. It's very bold in its approach, very visionary. Prime Minister Modi's policy is very visionary, far-sighted, far-reaching. He definitely, as the Prime Minister of India, he seeks India's welfare first, but he also looks towards the rest of the world, including the rest of the world. And I'm sure he bases his policy on the Sanskrit phrase of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means the world is one family. So, and now you see, here you have Prime Minister Modi's, his approach as the Prime Minister of India, but now as part of BRICS and these other groups, he is now, it's like marrying the two. So you have themes and concerns of BRICS that gel with his, as the Indian Prime Minister, and his vision. For example, having global governance reform for climate and environment issues, dealing with those issues, global health, multilateralism, not just bilateralism also. So these are all, they come together, they reflect Modi's vision. And now Modi has, I wouldn't say chosen Trinidad and Tobago, but I will say chosen Trinidad and Tobago to be his doorway into engaging the South. Yeah, I think it's because we are strategically placed in terms of our geographic location in the Caribbean. So we provide, and of course we can't ignore our economic position in the Caribbean. So he has, chosen Trinidad and Tobago because it will assist in his realizing his vision of these kinds of reforms and this kind of what you call a multipolar global space that he hopes to achieve. What also strengthens this is the fact that he has another level of ties to Trinidad, and that pertains to the diaspora. And he says that, I'm quoting from what he said in an interview, he said, he has deep-rooted historical, cultural ties, people-to-people connection, and that's very strong. Yeah? And he hopes on this trip to rejuvenate those special bonds of kinship and ancestry. So if you take this element of it, this is what I would call a more personal element, a cultural element, a people element, and you marry it with what he is hoping to achieve as a world leader, then it becomes very strong. In fact, I would say it gives India an edge, where if you were to think about the other world leaders, they don't have that kind of edge that is connected to the diaspora in the Caribbean, that Indian diaspora in the Caribbean. So I definitely think it will be a bilateral situation, but, Modi's vision, what BRICS stands for also, and of course Trinidad's involvement would definitely work for all parties.
How important is it? Because there's a great deal of positive, but one of the things I look at and wonder how it weighs in on the equation is the fact that in spite of everything, it's just this simple act of saying, we are going to look to ourselves. in terms of the way that we build alliances, build capacity, build strength, because historically we are used to looking to different spaces, looking further afield, as opposed to saying, okay, well, we're going to put more of our eggs in this basket in the global south. And that can be a powerful position.
Absolutely.
And it can also get some people a bit agitated and say, I'm not necessarily liking that. Let's see what we do about it.
I would say it's long overdue. Yes, people get agitated because people like their little comfort zones. They know, okay, we engage the X, we have been engaging X for so long, why not continue? It works, or so they think. They are comfortable. So many are okay with comfortable. But I think we are at a stage where we want more than comfortable. And you're right, the point is, why can't we look to ourselves? Why do we have to keep looking to X when we've had a not so very, laudable history with some of X? Yeah. So yes, we look to ourselves, and this is one element that India shares with Trinidad and Tobago and also many of the other Caribbean islands, because we share that history of colonialism. Yes, and I think that is part of Modi's grounding and his focus on the South. It's a geographic South, but I think there's more of an ideological South also there, because in engaging Ghana and Namibia, he also cited that colonial kind of, connection. So definitely it's about time we look within. We will find that strength within, and we take the chance to look elsewhere, move out of our comfort zone.
And part of that is seeing how easily supply chains can be disrupted. And we say, okay, so until the lesson is learned, it will be taught.
Yes.
So in terms of trying to learn that lesson and learn new ways of being. But with regard to learning new ways of being, though, some people say it's better to bend the tree while it's young. How do youth factor in, especially when we have consumptions? Hey, I lump myself with youth. Especially when youth have consumption habits from different spaces, as opposed to looking outwards, and I like the term X, looking towards that ideological positionality of the global South to make those connections.
I think the youth, they definitely have a role to play in this context here. We can see it panning out in many ways. For example, education. As you said, why do we only look to X when we want to go abroad for whether secondary or tertiary education? There are now other avenues. So take the chance. Yeah. And India, there are other avenues, but we're talking about India. India, there are so many, very outstanding universities and other institutions in India covering all subject matters. Yeah, so the youth can start there. Let's say it's a start. And then also I do see the youth, playing a very fundamental role when it comes to engaging this new movement in terms of IT and communication technology. They're living it. It's their life. Yeah, so they can be at the forefront of this engagement, and of course, it will be passed down, to, let's say, the older people like myself and so on. But I do think that, having the youth at the helm when we come to IT, it definitely will augur better for us. Your youth, in terms of not just Indian diaspora, but a diaspora, I can see that the youth, they engage being a part of a diaspora differently, in a more confident way. When we look at past generations of Indians, let's use Indians, past generations of Indians, they engage diaspora, let's say the homeland, in a very reverential kind of manner. Now, I'm not saying that the youth are not cognizant of the connection, of that kind of ancestral connection. They are, but they are, and this works both ways, they are less emotional about it. They are, and I'm speaking to my students at the university, they are less emotional, they recognize that connection, but they want to explore on a different level, minus those reverential feelings. So I think this kind of mindset would allow them to engage, whether it's India or other spaces, with more confidence. And be able to navigate both Trinidad and India in a more productive manner.
Because I think sometimes that reverential manner can lead to a level of almost self-exclusion, as though I'm not allowed
Yes.
to. I won't go as far as saying I'm not worthy, but I'm not necessarily allowed to.
Yes.
And so you have less reservations, so you're able to explore a little more fully. You have some people who would say that play is the greatest form of research, so you don't have the stress of making a mistake sometimes in
Yes.
terms of how you try to access. But those cultural academic exchanges, moving them, do you see them happening more in India? Do you see them happening more in Trinidad? Where do we start? Where do we continue? What does that look like?
I think it can work both ways. Currently, we do have, it is working both ways, where India offers scholarships, the High Commission and so of scholarships to students from Trinidad to India for study. Initially, it was more along the lines of Hindi and cultural studies, the art forms, but now it's extended to the academics. At the University of the West Indies, we also have chairs. So chairs in Indian studies, chairs in Hindi. I think they were setting up also short term for now a chair in Ayurvedic studies. So it has been not on a very great level, but it has been a two-way sort of process. And I do see more, more avenues for this to expand, whether in the field of research, both ways, Trinidad and in India, research, having institutional collaborations, we can probably have a chair of Caribbean studies at some university in India, a chair of Indian diaspora studies, specifically related to the indenture diaspora. So they have started, and from very early on, they have started these collaborations in terms of academics and so on. But there is definitely room for expansion.
You open the door, and I want to walk through it. In terms of at school, is it that it is people who look at it as an opportunity to learn or find out more about themselves? Is it a matter of, there's a more general interest? Do you need to sell the courses that you do? How does one find it, seek it, and is there a rationale behind saying, okay, well, I'm going to do Indian diaspora studies? What is that process like?
Well, first of all, you enter university, and a lot of the time, most of our students come from the humanities, which is where the discipline of history is located. Then we also have students from the social sciences, very much connected, and then sprinkling from elsewhere. We offer, you can at least have a minor in Indian history and also Indian diaspora studies. So you go on the university's website and see what the history department has to offer, and these courses will come up. Yeah, so that's at the undergraduate level. At the postgraduate level, there is also the opportunity to do your MA research paper on an Indian topic, whether Indian diaspora, you can also extend it to India. And then MPhil, PhD, you can do your research up to PhD, which is what I did, on Indian studies and the Indian diaspora. So it's there at the university. People just have to become a little bit more aware.
And hopefully we have the opportunity to speak about where that puts you in terms of a level of cultural confidence. But I believe we have some highlights from the airport building at this point in time. So we take that in as we prepare, as we get ready for the arrival of the Prime Minister of the Republic of India to our shores. Slight taste of the cultural presentation that the Prime Minister of India will be privy to when he arrives on our shores. We have our Prime Minister, Kanda Prasad Bissessa, already waiting, and I'm hearing, well, that's actually a helicopter, so I guess that's not the plane as yet, but we are bringing this to you. We see members, because members of the diaspora have been invited to this occasion. And as we have more information, we will share it with you. I think we'll also have some conversations because Sunalala is at that site and location to bring you some of these conversations, some of the sights and the sounds as we await Shri Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, as he is welcomed to Trinidad by our Prime Minister. There we see Moko Jumbis holding flags, both of Trinidad and Tobago and India, a sight to behold. Live highlights at this point in time. And while we wait for the arrival of the Prime Minister of India, Dr. Singh, you drew the line for us, looking at culture, looking at trading, investment. You spoke a little about building capacity. Where do you see the partnership evolving? And if you say, people like to talk about short, medium, long term, what does that look like for you?
I definitely see it evolving into something strong on all levels, in terms of culture, in terms of investments, bilateral engagements, and so on. I definitely see it, having those kinds of strong ties. Each space, that is the Trinidad and Tobago and India, each has a lot to offer the other, and each has a lot to learn from each other. Especially now when it's also, this kind of economic ties, but also the history. And that connection is only going to make it stronger because it's that sort of personal element there that comes in for Prime Minister Modi and also for India, because he is engaging his diaspora. India is engaging her diaspora at all these levels. So I definitely see you will have short-term results, depending maybe in IT, ICT, in education, but you also will have long-term results in terms of spaces like agriculture, in terms of new energy, solar, wind energy, and so forth. So definitely, and as I said, Trinidad is assisting India towards its entry into this new South space by the Caribbean into Latin America and so forth. So for each of the parties, there would be short, medium, long-term results, benefits to all, for sure.
And I think sometimes when people look at relationships like this, they think that things can only move from the larger geographical space, the higher concentration of people, to the smaller space. And I'm really glad that while it may not be even at this point in time, it's not as though it's just one direction.
Way. Definitely. I mean, it's one of the things that I think other diaspora spaces can learn from this interaction between India and Trinidad and Tobago, is that, the smaller country, as you say, the diaspora can offer something to that larger space, and in the diaspora context, that motherland, as we would call it. Yeah, it sort of reaffirms that within the diaspora context that, in the indenture diaspora, because it was a long period after indenture, where many people in the diaspora in Trinidad and elsewhere, they felt almost like forgotten people. As I said, India was busy with its independence and trying to work things out. And, they knew that these people had made these various locations their home, so they were okay. But culturally speaking, emotionally speaking, many Indians, 30s, 40s, 20s, they felt very much afloat in that sense. So now it is a situation of, it can come back. Yeah. So it's like doing away with this feeling of floating and alienation. So, and it also shows that you don't only have to engage this motherland figure on an emotional or cultural level. Here, we are engaging the motherland on a different level that, let's say, at the beginning of the 20th century, nobody would have thought that this would happen at all. Yeah. So it's a different kind of relationship. And I do think a lot of the other diasporas can look and learn and understand that, this is what is happening. And it gives diaspora people an opportunity to engage a different India. because when indentured laborers left India, it was an absolutely downtrodden economy, society that they left. And now we are engaging this India, this burgeoning India, this successful, this on the way to becoming an economic giant kind of India, and in the persona of Shri Narendra Modi. So it gives these Indian indentured laborers, their descendants, it gives them that sense of pride that, you know, India is not just about this downtrodden space that we came from, but this is what it is. And we have the chance now to engage it and engage each other, you know, and help to each other to grow and to benefit in different ways.
And I guess that also speaks to the cultural confidence that I was hinting at, saying that there is this possibility. Why? Because you see it.
Yes.
And talking about seeing it in the person of Shri Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India at this point in time. Also, speaking of the person, seeing the possibilities in the person, I want you to speak to the significance of this welcome, this meeting of two prime ministers, and specifically the fact that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who is greeting the Prime Minister of India, is a woman, is an Indian woman who is the head of this party, and it is the second time that she is in this office.
This is in itself what you have described, this meeting of a female Indian Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago with the Prime Minister of India, a male. It speaks volumes. It speaks volumes for the diaspora. It speaks volumes for India. It tells of a story. We can say it is now the climax of the story, but I won't say the climax because you don't know where the story will go again. But it is a climatic point in the story where from a situation of various levels of oppression and suppression, moving out of that space, Indians, and of course Indian women, they've now made that journey to where an Indian woman has become Prime Minister. And I think Prime Minister Modi will just take immense pride in knowing that this daughter, this granddaughter of the diaspora, you know, she is now leading a country, and a country that's, you know, she's Indian, but a country that's multi-ethnic in that sense. So I think it speaks a lot about the journey of the Indians in the diaspora, the journey of the Indians in Trinidad and Tobago as a diasporic community. It also speaks about, in terms of Indian women, you know, I know there's a lot of changes have taken place in terms of the role and position of Indian women in India, as it has in Trinidad also. So I think it will be very heartening for Prime Minister Modi and us to understand that we have to go back in the history, which I won't do now, it'll be too long, to understand, you know, what women had to deal with and how they navigated so many spaces of oppression and so on, to come to where we are today, to the point that we have a female Indian Prime Minister. So in terms of, you know, more gendered kind of analysis, I think that it is a very proud moment. It's also a moment where, for the diaspora person, you know, it brings you immense pride to not just say, okay, this is one of us, but also say, one from our land, so to speak, is now meeting one of us. So it is a very emotional moment, a very sentimental moment in that sense.
And you said it would be a very long tale, but asking from some of the research that you've done, what are some of the ways that women navigate that world in terms of that line between tradition, modernity, which sometimes can seem to be at odds?
I would say, first of all, in 2025, I don't know if we should be saying tradition and modernity still. Because, too, we have to remember that what is tradition today was once modern. And what is modern today will one day be tradition, yes? But I understand what you said. I was just being cheeky.
Thank you for the grace.
Yes, but on a serious note, they've had to navigate a lot. We look at Indian women today, I mean women generally, but we're speaking about Indian women, and they are in everything. There is hardly in the world out there, you know, somebody, you know, not many people dare say no, a woman can't do this simply because she's a woman. Yeah, the restrictions are almost all gone. Maybe in the private space you still have some of those elements at play, but in the public space, you know, even if it's there in the public space, it's not overtly, visible. But what I can say is that yes, still there is navigation between this private and public space, but I don't think it's specific for women, because a man would, you know, be one way in a public space, but when he goes home, he's a different way. You know, he might do certain things home that he's not comfortable doing in a private space. But, you know, women have had to deal with this too. It's just that because, you know, in, let's say, in 40s, 50s, maybe up to the 80s, you know, things were so gendered in a sense, especially for Indian women, where, you know, women's, you know, relegated to things like, okay, housework, looking after the children. Up to the 70s, many Indian women did what people call stayed at home, but it wasn't really staying at home in the sense of not working, because they were working. Apart from looking after a household, they were working. Almost all women in the rural areas were working in the agricultural field, so they were working double time in that sense. But there is this idea that once it's in the home, you don't count it as work in that sense.
Yes,
but this is a very different occasion.
It is.
But at the same time, there are levels of protocol, there are levels of procedure.
Yes.
What are some of those things that we're looking forward to today?
Well, DK, before we reach into that, I want to coin a phrase today. Remember last year we spoke about diplomacy. I want to coin the phrase the diplomatic circle. And it's the beginning of the diplomacy from beginning to end. And the diplomatic circle is basically what you're about to witness now. And the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force is always honored to be a part of the opening part of the diplomatic circle, which is what we're going to witness, a guard of honor. So you're going to see a guard of honor. From there, just like we normally do, you would see an inspection, and then it will continue into a procession by giving a salute, and then they move on into the other aspects of the diplomatic circle.
No, I don't know if it's maths that I'm going to ask you to do for me, but I heard a term, it's the first time I've heard it.
Yeah.
A half guard.
A half guard, yes. So there are different types of guards based on numbers. So it's 45, then there's 95, and then there's a higher number. According to the Queen's regulations and the drill manual, it's broken down into different numbers and different roles and functions. But this half guard is more so will be totally comprising of the Trinidad and Tobago Air Guard.
And so, yes, there's you said the Air Guard as well as who, please?
It's strictly the Air Guard today. So it's going to be the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force Air Guard, and they will provide the Guard of Honor half for the official visit.
And when you say Guard of Honor,
yes,
is there a specific place that they're going to be posted or positioned? Because we see the plane still taxiing.
So they're going to be positioned as along the runway and along where you can see, if we can get footage, you'll actually see where there'll be a red carpet. Right, so as soon as the plane stops, there will be a red carpet. Then you'll see saluting dais. And from the dais, that's where the Guard of Honor will take place.
And it's interesting looking at the work that is still taking place in the short term.
I am going to tell you now. I just wanted to make mention, even if it would have come up into shot, the red carpet. The work that happens before the actual event is in my opinion, and the opinion of my seniors and almost even persons who are junior to me, is that it's unheralded work. No one tells you thanks, but it's work that we are honored to do. And even if you just look at the red carpet The red carpet is laid down, it's nailed down, it's swept, it's kept clean by members of the Support and Service Battalion at Tetron Barracks, the Pioneer Department. And that aspect is also part of the recognition of diplomacy, because a red carpet signifies, powerful symbolism of ceremonial significance. It signifies diplomacy, it signifies a state protocol, and you can see once that occurs, there's a beautiful diplomatic scene of a dignitary walking onto a red carpet and then receiving a salute, and from there inspecting and then carrying on with the day.
And speaking of a beautiful scene, I consider this a beautiful scene, the one that we just saw, in terms of having Moko Jumbis in the foreground and the plane carrying the Prime Minister of India behind them while they're getting closer to that red carpet.
That's what you'll call cultural diplomacy. That is, and it's part of the circle. So you're seeing military diplomacy, cultural diplomacy. I mean, I can't speak to the bilateral agreements or the MOUs that will be signed, but it all fits and lines up as part of the visit.
And we tried to get some of that information from the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, but he was very cagey with it, as understandably he could be. But it is very interesting because I can see some people even wondering, so why have Moko Jumbis there and trying to just streamline it to elements that are a lot more East Indian or Indian in nature, as opposed to saying, this is who we are.
Yeah.
And we are sharing who we are with you in honor of your visit. It actually takes me to the term namaste, which is with the strength in my hands, the love in my heart, the intelligence of my mind. I greet the divine within you. And you don't necessarily do that with peace of yourself.
No.
You don't make that distinction in terms of like that synthetic distinction. And even that we're looking at that, we see the flag of Trinidad and Tobago and the flag of India on the nose, almost the nose of the plane.
I agree with you.
There's that red carpet that you were speaking about, sir.
Yes. So you can, to have that red carpet there, it needs to be placed many hours before. And the senior NCO, the sergeant who's responsible for it, has to ensure that as soon as the guest or the head of state comes off, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's properly swept. It's not supposed to even have a bleach mark on it. And I know that they do their best in actually making sure that the area is ready for a day like this.
And even looking at the fact that you say that it is unheralded work, but if there's an issue, then that is an issue.
Very correct. Very correct.
Because it starts from the things even before words are exchanged.
Yes.
There are these things that show how much we think that this visit means, and there are these non-verbal levels of communication.
Correct.
All forming part of the diplomatic circle.
I mean, there's an advance party. So advance party will go in and say, this is what we want, this is how it's going to happen. And this is not this is not military language, but it's more so going into the whole diplomatic circle of, we have to prepare before the principal actually arrives. And that's something that we could have seen Independence last year, where there was a preparation before Her Excellency arrived. And after Her Excellency leaves the space, there's also things that have to fall into place as well. So it's a lot of an unheralded work. And I know for a fact, being a serving member myself, that the men and women who are out there, yes, it's hard, yes, the sun is hot, but they are part of history that they can tell their grandkids 10, 20 years from now. They can pull this up, can pull this up on YouTube and show someone, Google me, look, I'm right there, I'm there. You know, that's the level of pride that you can see that they will not show you with their face, but they're inside, they're beaming it.
Yeah, and there's a certain courage that you find people holding themselves with. and saying, okay, well, yes, I'm representing my grouping.
Yes.
I'm also representing myself.
Yes.
I'm representing those that will come after me, to your point.
Yeah.
Look, auntie was there, uncle was there,
Very
dad
true.
was we were there on this day.
Very correct.
And these are the things that, well, some of the things that you actually say, all right, I'm very happy that I've been able to work to this position, because just by its nature, a half guard would not necessarily be as many people numerically.
Yeah.
So you're getting things whittled away, so it's the best representation that you're moving towards.
Yes, and there are other things that are planned for the entire visit, but you are getting the best of the best, according to Will Smith, the best of the best, sir. And I think the ladies and gentlemen who formed this guard of honor, again, I'll say it again, I'm more than privileged to be here.
Looking at and even before we get into what is going to be happening in terms of protocol, how much more of a challenge is it when there are things that you're trying to get done and implement, but there would be pieces of information that you have embargoed, you're not able to share this, or in terms of like the total schedule, so that everyone is on the same page, because it's as needs to know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of almost everything, even in the military. You know, there are times where you have implied tasks, and the implied tasks are, if I tell you to do A, and I don't give you the other information and I ask, and that information is not privy, I am also supposed to do my estimate and confirm I have 3 courses of action. What do I do in this one if this situation happens? It's something that we like to do in military training called war gaming. So we put out many different scenarios and assess what's going to happen at any point in time. For example, I remember there was a military diplomatic course I did, and they made mention of, what if a horse dies? Do I have an excavator to lift the horse off? Or what are my actions on for any type of circumstance or situation based on my restraints, based on on things that I have available to me, my resources? So these are the things that you may not be aware of all the things, but you try to plan for everything.
Is initiative allowed like that?
Yes. Yeah. And initiative is allowed. You also have to know how to go about doing it.
I like how you're putting that qualifier.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes people may lean towards saying, okay, well, there's an instruction.
Yes.
And you carry it out to the best of your ability.
Yes.
The best of your ability is to get it done.
Yeah.
But to your point, the implied instruction, which may need you to add a few steps.
Right. And in adding those few steps, you always go back to your commander who gave you the instruction, and you seek clarity. And from that, once you get clarity, you continue along your task.
Speaking of tasks, as we see some members of the diaspora waiting to welcome the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, I see 2, and we have the Indian flags as well,
yes,
or the flags of the Republic of India.
Yes.
I see 2 sets of stairs.
Right. On the plane?
Yes. Who uses what stairs?
Right. So I'm glad you recognize that. If you can look beyond the shot, you're going to see there was a van that pulled up behind it, right? That's assistants, a staff, all auxiliary staff that would there we go.
We see some people disembarking.
There we go.
Now.
You have your media. Now they go through a different aspect, and then a different door, and then from there you will see the Honorable Prime Minister actually coming down the main stairway.
I think there will even be the opportunity for, let me say, image taken, because I don't want to say shot,
right,
or video footage taken of the Prime Minister of India, possibly at the top of the stairs?
Possibly. I think, I'm not sure what a goodly cameraman would do, but yeah, I believe so.
But we're trying to get everything to the individuals tuned into this broadcast. And even when we were looking at some of the people waiting, I saw someone looking, it seems as though he was in a Ram Leela costume. But here we have our Prime Minister, who is getting ready to greet Prime Minister Modi.
Yes.
The Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar. And we see a gift of flowers that will also be presented to Prime Minister Modi.
Yes. That is the aide, Captain J. Richards.
And even like the saying, I was there at this point in time. I think this young man is forever going to remember this as a point in his life.
Yes, yes. I agree with you.
So we're getting ready to see who next will be disembarking. You see there is a measured approach. I even like the mix of the gentlemen because I believe this young man is a performer. He's been on 12 and Under as well on TTT.
Okay.
We have Minister Sean Sobers, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. I'm seeing, I believe this is the Indian High Commissioner as well as the person in charge of protocol at Piako airports. On the carpet to greet Prime Minister Modi. And yes, it does look as though the unheralded work was quite successful.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
And the fact that there's so many incremental nuances placed in, it makes me even wonder whether or not there might be a reason that we have some people who are on the red carpet, some people who aren't. But or is this me overthinking?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure with respect to the amount of persons on the red carpet.
So we'll be looking at positioning, where the half guard will be.
Yes.
Where Madam Prime Minister will be. Because we also have members of the cabinet as well.
I'm seeing that. So DK, just to inform our viewing public, or the viewing listeners as well, a quarter guard or a guard of honor, it symbolizes, it's a form of symbol and respect and tribute. It is used to honor dignitaries, heads of state, royalty, fallen soldiers, important guests. It represents the highest form of military respect. It also displays discipline and precision. From the time the guard commander calls his word of command and the soldiers or the defense force personnel execute their drill with precision, it shows that level of professionalism, discipline, and coordination. It's also cultural and historical. Once a state visit, its honor represented and shown to a foreign leader. It's also used in opening of parliament, as we would have seen a couple of months ago. National pride. It also expresses the democracy and change of power. Diplomacy is at show. It is a diplomatic gesture that grants respect, goodwill, and strengthening of bilateral relations between two states.
And it's interesting the levels that diplomacy can run at. There are things that you see in
Yes.
terms of what we're seeing now.
Yes.
There are also things that you don't see.
Yes.
And sometimes those unheralded, to use your term, things that fly below the surface that so few people know about have such far-reaching implications and effects.
Yes.
So we see some members of the airport authority getting ready almost at the forehatch.
Yes.
So we're waiting to see when it opens. And who's the first person to disembark from the front of the plane?
Well, I am not aware of that, but I can, if I'm to make an educated guess, it may be the Prime Minister's chief of protocol.
Okay, but at this point in time, we see that members of the Trinidad and Tobago cabinet, they've been escorted by a protocol officer to form the greeting line along the red carpet. And the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, the Chief of Protocol, and the High Commissioner for India, they apparently will board the aircraft.
Right.
So we're looking forward to see that at this point in time. Elements. And let me also mention the fact that you see how those flags are rippling in the breeze.
Yes.
Now, we would have done a site visit earlier to make sure that things are the way they're supposed to be.
Right.
And that breeze is nothing to sniff at. So just looking at the fact that wanting to represent themselves well,
Yes.
sometimes you see that slight side to side, which is also a form of helping to maintain balance as opposed to just trying to remain static with it. I remember you said there's a trick you do
That's
sometimes
the trick of the trade, yes.
in terms of
Heel to toe.
moving
Yes.
heel to toe
Yes.
inside your boots.
Yes, inside your boots, but you don't do it too quickly because that's one of the close arrest charges. One of the close arrest charges would be forms of close arrest would be idleness on parade. So if you're moving, if you're idle, we have this statement that we say if a fly lands on you or a mosquito lands on your face, you say let it feed. You're not to touch it because you'll be in violation of that standing order. And you can be placed under close arrest.
I'll say these things and hurt my feelings sometimes.
It's not a hurt feelings part. It's actually part of, again, what the military represents, which is precision, discipline. This also here is part of the highest representation that any soldier can give to a head of state. And if you look at it, if I'm to draw a number of dots, all the dots make up, close dots together make up a solid line. If I'm to do that, this aspect here, if I misrepresent or I'm idle on parade, I am going to destroy the entire picture that someone has of Trinidad and Tobago and put a stain on the diplomatic circle of which I am carded to uphold.
And just looking at that point, I think that is one of the things I'm going to take away with regard to this broadcast as well, in terms of that those series of dots, you put them close together, you get that solid line. So everyone has a part to play.
That
it
is
might be
correct.
different, it
Yes.
might be varied, but at the same time, all hands on deck, as some people say.
Yes, because if the pioneers from the pioneer department did not lay the carpet properly, it would have also presented a form of disrespect. If all the members of the Air Guard suddenly turned up unwell and we had no one to do the Guard of Honor, which would have been, that would have hardly ever happened. It all plays a part. We all have a role to play.
We're looking at the roles that are being played at this point in time as the members of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago are awaiting. And it is interesting because Prime Minister Modi was carded the plane was originally supposed to reach a little later, and then we
Right.
heard it was reaching earlier,
Right.
and then it felt as though it found this golden mean.
Yes.
So, and part of these things can be checks, because and how important are those checks? And one of the things I appreciate about the armed services is the way that things will be done real time to get the incremental time down to the second.
Yes. It's really important, because if we take and act like everything like what we're doing is extremely serious, it's going to reflect on the real day. So that's why you have rehearsals and dress rehearsals, and you walk through the entire thing. You make sure that you rehearse correctly. You, as the guard commander, will recite your word or commands in your head or even loudly, because you don't want to make a mistake. And the most important thing, one of the most important things, is to ensure that you put on a good show, and you represent well, because it's going to be put down in history that you were the guy, and nobody wants to be that guy.
And the thing is, sometimes those things live so much longer and they have so much more legs.
Yes, than the actual truth of the day. One mistake may actually mar the entire visit, and that's why we want to ensure that we have a proper execution.
So we see more movement, and it seems as though this is another group of individuals who have come from the
Yes.
rear of the plane.
And there are things that you won't see as well too. The Defense Force at times will also be responsible for transportation, and arms of the Ministry of Defense will also be part of transporting some of the dignitaries, some of the assistants from point A to point B. And that's part of the inherited work, part of the dots you don't see, part of the things that you would not know. In short, we have a shot of the colors, the Air Guard colors.
I'm not used to seeing them by themselves.
That's correct. Yeah.
And
I mean, we are currently Piaco. The Air Guard is stationed at Piaco International Airport, UCAS station, Ulrich Cross Air Station.
there we have that door being opened. More checks being done. And we will expect the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, the Chief of Protocol, and the High Commissioner for India to board the craft.
Yeah. Seeing that happening.
And they would have actually done so in that order as well.
Yes.
And it always brings you in a little more to hear natural sound.
Yes.
But we would have spoken to the situation, because you're actually hearing some of that breeze at this point in time. Is that one of the vehicles that you were speaking about?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, we just had the High Commissioner for India. Then we have Minister Sean Sobers, Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, disembarking. Now have the Chief of Protocol. And next we should see the Prime Minister of the Republic of India.
Correct. Once he disembarks the plane, you're going to see the Prime Minister of India take a position at the saluting dais. The guard commander will order the general salute, present arms. The general salute fanfare will be played, the national anthem of India and the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
And there we have the man himself.
Historic moment as his feet lands on the soil of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, we have that first exchange with the Honorable Kamala Prasad Visesa presenting a Prime Minister Modi with a bouquet of flowers. And then we have young Mr. I believe it's Zaydan. And there he's posing for a shot. Possibly admiring his attire. We can see that Prime Minister Modi has a sense of the occasion as well, and he's even directing individuals to where they should be posing with him for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
I totally agree with you.
The Chief of Protocol just introduced Prime Minister Modi, and was this to the captain?
This is to Captain Naval Don Polo, commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. This is the saluting dice that we were talking about earlier.
And other members of the Prime Minister's entourage would have exited the rear of the aircraft.
Yes. National anthem of India. They're currently the guard commander has just ordered arms, shouldered arms, and ordered arms. The guard commander will march up, salute, and report to the Honorable Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, and invite him to inspect the guard accompanied by the Chief of Defense Staff representative. Guard commander will now escort the Prime Minister of India to inspect the guard, along with the Chief of Defense Staff representative, Captain Naval Don Polo.
Looking at the bilateral relations that this visit is supposed to engender and develop, it is very interesting. The song that is being, or should I say it is quite apt, the song that is being played, One Love,
Yes.
by Shadow. Prime Minister Modi is now being introduced to the government MPs by the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. You see everyone trying to get that one shot.
The $1 million shot.
There we have the Igbo rhythm being played by members of the Malik folk performers. We should also see cultural display by Shiv Shakti dancers and the Malik folk performers, who themselves have a very good working relationship together, showing us what we can be as a people.
It's the expression of Trinidad and Tobago, I would say. sensation of pride, nationalism, that nationalistic kind of just joy inside. Do you feel it?
I do. I'm also looking at logistics.
Okay.
And I say logistics in the sense that I can imagine Prime Minister Modi almost having an internal clock saying, okay, he wants to spend the exact amount of time by both aspects of the cultural display.
Yes.
And now he's being greeted by the 100-person diaspora contingent who are gathered on the carpet. I'm also looking at the work being done by members of services, head on a swivel, making sure that no one in their charge and their care.
Everyone has a role to play, part of adding up to the dots.
Yes, It's very interesting what you see in a broadcast like this versus those $1 million shots where we get a curated view.
Yes.
Or we get an idea of the person behind the lenses vision at that point in time.
Right. Yes, that is very true.
And sometimes it's just the opportunity that they had because that is the space that they were in.
Yeah.
It's also such a display of stakeholders that have to come together to make an event like this happen. As Prime Minister Modi is getting ready to proceed to his vehicle in the motorcade. And even looking at the logistics at this aspect of the proceedings, because you would have individuals who would have just met Prime Minister Modi on the red carpet, been introduced to him, having to leave in advance to make sure that they're there to greet him when he arrives.
Yes.
And I guess that would be part of the reason that we had some places closed to allow for, hopefully, easier movement of traffic?
Yeah, I would think so.
And
maybe infrastructure is already in place for us to execute that. So I believe that could be one of the reasons why.
And the lights on the vehicles also help.
It's an added on feature.
One that is usually worked quite hard for, as we see the flag of India on the vehicle.
Yes.
They spoke of pride, and sometimes we think that pride might just be in individuals who are in the armed services or some aspects of the defense services. You see these gentlemen part of the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, making sure that nothing ill takes place under their watch as well. As we still have the joint display of culture between Malik and Shiv Shakti.
Yes.
And once again, looking at the fact that this is taking place in conditions where, one, they're standing, as we see the Prime Minister taking off to be part of that motorcade, heading to where he's going to eventually meet more of the diaspora.
Yes.
Because at this point in time, on the tarmac, it was just 100 members of the diaspora. So we invite you to stay tuned to TTT Limited, where there will be the opportunity for more members of the diaspora to see him closer.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, DK. This was a historic day that everyone who witnessed it, who participated, who was in front, who was behind, they must be proud of this day. I would say a job well done to all persons who would have made this day a success.